We're here at Rocky Mountain National Park, and we're here to talk about the disappearance of Bobby Bizup. He disappeared August 15th, 1958. There's been many unusual disappearances at the park in the last 100 years. This one happened just outside the park. His body was later recovered inside the park. And we'll go to those locations shortly. On the drive to St. Malo, we saw a couple of bull elk that are native to this area while they were grazing next to the road. We're here at St. Malo Retreat, owned by the Archdiocese of Denver. We're about 15 miles south of Estes Park, Colorado, about 45 miles due north of Denver in the Rocky Mountains. Just to my west is Mount Meeker. Mount Meeker is a location that sits next to Long's Peak, a 14er in the Rocky Mountain Range. Here at St. Malo on August 15th, 1958, Bobby Bizup was at a summer camp sponsored by the Catholic Church, along with probably 100 other kids. He was fishing in a creek just behind us when a camp counselor at 6 p.m. came up to him and told him it was time for dinner. Bobby nodded it was okay. He was a special needs child. He was deaf. The counselor said he saw Bobby behind him walking with him down the hill towards their resort. And when he got back to the resort, Bobby was gone. There was a search that started at 6:30 that night, immediately after Bobby disappeared, and it lasted for 4 days. The 4-day special search, where there were almost 300 people, covered 16 square miles, went up onto Mount Meeker, up to approximately 11,000 feet, and had a radius of 4 miles in each direction. They didn't find anything. And in fact, the camp superintendent made allegations that they thought Bobby was hiding. There was also an allegation that a physician saw Bobby in Estes Park walking on the street. All those turned out not to be true. It wasn't until over a year later that 3 camp counselors were searching Mount Meeker, an area that had been searched multiple times in the past, and they found his remains. In those remains, they found his hearing aid, they found bits of clothing, and a few bits of bones, and nothing else. And the location that Bobby was found, it was approximately 3.5 miles from the location he was last seen, and 2,500 feet up from where he was last seen. So not only did a 10-year-old boy allegedly climb 2,500 feet up the side of Mount Meeker, but he also went 3 miles uphill. And anyone who's been in this location for any period of time knows that Muddy Creek flows downhill towards the lodge where he was staying at. There would be no misconception that the lodge would have been uphill. So the real mystery is, how did Bobby Bizup get up onto the side of Mount Meeker? And where was he during the search when 300 people were in the field looking for him? Now we're going to talk to the caretaker of St. Malo about the history of the property.
Hi there, I'm John Davis. I'm the caretaker here at St. Catherine of Sienna's Chapel on the Rock at St. Milo. It's kind of like all that. But this was built 1935 as a chapel for camp kids through all those years. Lots of camp kids came here. We tried to be open Wednesdays through Sunday, and especially in the summertime, which is big tourism, but amazing amount of people come here just to take pictures. John Paul II, Pope, was here in 1993. He was in Denver for World Youth Day. And I guess to get way back where it all began was a Monsignor Belchetti found this rock. And upon the rock, he built himself a church. A place for kids to come to. That was the main thing, get kids to come up here, camp out, spend some time, get away from the city. And it just developed and developed from there. Thousands of kids went to camp here through the years, and open to all denominations. I get a lot of people come in and go, oh my gosh, Catholic Church. And like, no, No, it's open to everybody. Everybody should see this. It's a wonderful property to come and see. It certainly is.
In summary, Bobby Bizup disappeared walking downstream and downhill following his counselor back to the lodge. It was 6 p.m., a time when every 10-year-old boy would be hungry and ready for dinner. Bobby disappeared in close proximity to the Rosary Walk sign I was standing next to. The sign is just 100 feet east of the Rocky Mountain National Park border. There was a massive search for Bobby, bloodhounds, helicopters, rangers, and volunteers, all finding nothing. The final remains of Bobby were located and found just above timberline on Mount Meeker, adjacent to the main gully, an area that was searched multiple times during the primary search. The real question we have to ask ourselves: how did Bobby's hearing aid, a few bones, and scattered pieces of clothing end up 2,500 feet up Mount Meeker and 3 to 3.5 miles from the point he was last seen? And when did those remains find their way into that location?